to another episode of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed. As always, big love from Cuddy. Welcome back to another episode. You know, in the Mind Management Mentors podcast, we're trying to get guests on to help people understand their minds, to understand belief systems, to understand their emotions better. I'm a big believer in the more we talk about these things, not from a victim perspective of, the whole world's against me, but actually start giving people solutions, we will start making a difference in the world. And today is no exception to that. You, Rhona, and I know we know each other, but you have such a magnificent story that we're going to share today. So introduce yourself to the Mind Management Mentors podcast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rhona Morrison. I know Cuddy from a business network group, but my background is I'm a retired doctor in the NHS in Scotland. I was a consultant forensic psychiatrist. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean talking to dead bodies at scenes of crime, although the forensic word implies that. But it does mean is dealing with the criminal justice system and mentally disordered offenders, mentally ill criminals. So that's what I did as my day job. But I retired 7 years ago, and I think what we're going to be talking about today is some of my experiences since that point in time.
Well, to be fair, Rhona, I've opened up 2 hours for this one because you've got so much to talk about that people need to hear. Yes, we're going to talk about grief and how to overcome grief and how you did it, because I think it's quite possible that you are an exception to the rule for how.
Possibly.
But maybe it's because of the life that you've had and understanding life and how it happens, that when it happens to you, you had an extremely, I think we can both say, logical way of looking at what happened.
Yeah,
which a lot of people, surely that's got to come from the history of what Rhona's done her entire life, which is absolutely fascinating, by the way, and we will be touching on that. So let's start the podcast in the middle of the story, which is the point of the story, as he points to his hair. Retired on the same day that you had your birthday, on the same day that you retired and it's your birthday, your husband died.
That's correct.
Well, shit. That's brutal.
It wasn't a sudden death. Some people, obviously, their partner maybe dies of a heart attack unexpectedly. My husband had been ill for 3 months and had been diagnosed with multiple inoperable brain tumours. So we'd had 3 months from the diagnosis until he passed to kind of come to terms with it. And actually, I think that was really important in the grieving process, in fact, because the doctor in me, you said my past history might have helped things. It did. The minute I heard that he was unwell with this particular problem, I knew we were heading for a sad endpoint in the near future. But it allowed me to start preparing before it happened, which we were fortunate to do. We were able to say what we needed to say. We were able to make some plans, and not everyone's afforded that opportunity. We were also in the situation where it wasn't a protracted period, so he didn't suffer for a long time. And we were able to say our goodbyes almost on a daily basis because he was losing function a little bit at a time every day. And you were saying your goodbyes and grieving in advance of the actual final moment. And so I think we were afforded a very special opportunity. So I look at it in a positive way rather than, it was a disaster, obviously, but actually we were very lucky and that we were able to do that and share in all the positive things that we'd achieved together and the memories we had. So we had very few regrets by the end, which again, I don't think a lot of people are in that circumstance.
So I think that's an excellent point. I think that's one of those things that we often talk about is, that regret can be one of the biggest things that brings us down that emotional scale to shame and guilt. But if you were given, as horrible as the news it was, that you've got 3 to 6 months, right, we can now plan. We know what the outcome is. We know what the ending is. We can now plan and move towards that. And like you said beautifully, as you're such an eloquent speaker, Rhona. The amount of times I've met you, you're such an eloquent speaker. You have that opportunity to say your goodbyes every day. We know what's coming and we get to manage it. That practicalness that many may have struggled with in the past, how do you believe that you're, because that's technically the middle of the story. That's not the beginning of the story, and that's not the end of the story. So we've actually gone to the midpoint of how quickly you got over grief with a positive attitude, which a lot of people watching this may or possibly say, how dare you say grief and a positive attitude? I'm not saying that in any way whatsoever. I'm a big believer, and I say this quite a lot, positive thinking can be bullshit. We're not sometimes going to positively think as way out of some horrible shit that's going on, to be fair. However, we can reframe situations and look at them differently to get the outcome that you've clearly talked about, Rhona. However, Rhona, we've started at the middle. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of the story.
That's a long time ago.
I know. So I would, and I think you're going to correct me on this one, because I would say, or I would have said in the past, the criminally insane or the mentally insane. See, that's why I wanted to say it, to see your reaction. That's exactly why I said it. So you said criminally insane. Did you say criminally insane? No.
Mentally disordered offenders.
Right, perfect. Right. Is that a recent term, or is that the term you've always worked with? And I want to say that. Tell me again.
Mentally disordered offenders is the correct terminology.
Perfect. Good.
Sometimes I say mentally ill criminals, which is not correct. But when I'm speaking to an audience who don't use this terminology, I use it really just so they can hook in very quickly to what I'm talking about, because I lecture about it. And it's, yes. I then, most of my lectures are about destigmatization and non-judgmental attitudes and language. But I actually do use the term at the beginning myself, but I don't ever use the word insane or...
No, I know you don't, which is why a lot of people would use criminally insane, right? And I can't believe I'm going to use a reference to the Joker from Batman. Technically, when he's referenced, he's mentally insane or criminally insane. That's a comic book reference. That's not a real world reference in any way.
There is an insanity plea in the court, so the word does come up, but it's not in normal language. It's not helpful. I think it sounds quite negative and judgmental, and actually is not helpful in terms of dealing with people and helping to rehabilitate them if they've got a label like that. So I think mentally disordered offender is stating what it is. Someone's committed a crime and they have a mental disorder that's contributed to that actual behaviour. And that's
right. So this is the perfect tagline, which is why this podcast may go longer than an hour, and we might be breaching the 2-hour mark. Hope you've got time. Sit down for a cup of tea. What is the difference between, because this is the stigma and this is the scare, because I work with mental health. And a lot of people don't want to talk about mental health because they think it's mental illness, which is completely different. How is it different, Rhona?
Well, I guess if you're mentally healthy, then you've got a feeling of well-being, being fulfilled, happy, etc. That's how I see if you have mental health.
Yeah.
But a mental illness is something that I dealt with. So it was an actual named disorder, for example, which had recognised symptoms and particular treatments, albeit that might be, cognitive behavioural treatment, talking therapies. It doesn't need to be antipsychotic medication or antidepressants or anything like that. There are lots of different, as you know, lots of different treatments. But some disorders, and the type of work that I was involved in was the more severe end, where it was more illnesses like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, old term manic depression, where there's definitely a need for medication as well as all the other holistic package of care involving talking therapies and all the things that make quality of life, be it social supports, activities, good housing, having enough money, all that, which contributes to your mental well-being. But I dealt with the more severe end. It's very niche. And I think the most important thing to say is that the majority of people, I'm sure all your listeners know this, the majority of people who have a mental illness, mental health problem are not a danger to anyone. But no. I dealt with the very niche end of the market where people committed serious crimes as a result of the direct symptoms they had of their illness. So I was very much at one end of a spectrum, seeing the difficult, scary, risky disorders.
Yes. So, and when you talk about that, be a little bit more specific, because we had the conversation. We actually did a radio show together. We had the conversation, and I always asked Rhona, how is it you were able to deal with that far end of the spectrum where somebody with a mentally disordered or a mentally disordered offender, I'm going to use your terminology, has gone and done something horrible to another person, and then you have to deal with them and talk to them as a nice person. Rhona, you're adorable. There's no, I mean, literally, people need to hear you speak, Rhona. There is, and I'll say it, your BNI was never the same once you left Rhona. I will tell you that now. When I walked into that room, you made everyone feel special.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe you saw the mental disorder offender in me and thought, I better talk to Cuddy nicely.
He needs kid gloves. Yeah. So no, you're asking about how could I work with these people. So that's way back in the story, long before I was a doctor.
It is.
I'm the youngest of three, and my middle sister was born with learning difficulties, physical disability, and sensory impairment. In old money, in old terminology, my parents were told she was deaf, dumb, and blind. So I grew up visiting my sister in care. They were advised that she needed 24-hour care, and I visited my sister every week. For her 23 years on this planet, she never spoke a word. I don't know if she heard me at all, but I had a very special bond with my sister, closer than anyone, I think. I'm not sure why. But I didn't judge her for the labels, for her disability. I just loved her for who she was, and I saw the person. And I believe that core belief about, not being judgmental is one of the major reasons I was able to work in the field that I did, because I had to see the human being behind the sensationalist headlines. I had to see this was someone's son, someone's daughter. They didn't ask to get ill. A lot of the major mental illnesses are hereditary. They didn't ask or do anything to get ill. They often have got ill without being noticed. That maybe illnesses like this tend to come on late teens, early 20s. And so often they've gone off to university, maybe academically very able, off to university, away from home. An illness starts. You don't waken up with schizophrenia. You get the symptoms, come on over a period of weeks and months. And so nobody notices the subtle change because they're in an environment where their local family are not there. And they start behaving just slightly odd and then getting slightly odd ideas. And then, unfortunately for them, the ones that I was seeing, rather than it just being slightly paranoid ideas or hearing voices that weren't particularly troublesome, I was meeting the people who unfortunately had voices that maybe said, that person in the room next door is the devil, you have to save the world, you'll need to kill the devil. And they have got a weapon and they've gone and killed someone and come to light at that point. And you might say that's a heinous crime. They've stabbed someone 40 times, and they've bled out and whatever. And of course it is. And it's a danger to the public. And, the public needs protected. I absolutely need to be convicted and there's got to be a consequence. But if it's an illness driven, it's based on the delusions or hallucinations and they've done it, then that's an illness that's not going to go away. You can't cure it, but you can treat it. So it's really important that they go to hospital, secure hospital, and get treatment. Because if we can manage the illness, it means when they come back out, maybe a lengthy period in hospital, but when they come back out, then they can be monitored and managed and treated on an ongoing basis to keep the public safe, to get them mentally well, and for them to have a quality of life. So in order to do that, I can't see the crime. I see it in order to manage the risk, but actually I've got to see the individual because I'm on a journey with them to treat them and rehabilitate them and get them to be the best that they can be. And so sensationalist headlines, or the terminology we talked about earlier, are really unhelpful when you're trying to bring someone back into the community, maybe many years later. So the non-judgmental thing in me allowed me to do that. I was able to see past the label.
And so you was, and that's not easy. To be fair, that's not easy.
Well, I quite often say, dealing with someone who's raped a child or murdered a granny is not for everyone. No. I was rubbish with anxious ladies. So I don't know what that says about me, but I was able to work with that particular client group, and I think part of it was a lot of doctors are quite academic. They know all the drugs metabolize into this and the algorithms for treating that or whatever. And I don't, I mean, I'm academic enough, I've passed all the exams, but I don't see myself as an academic. My actual skill set was working with people and getting them to trust me. And if you've got a large paranoid guy who's been wielding a machete, or you have to go out to their house and see them and talk them down when they're agitated and a bit psychotic and get them into hospital, the skill set is different. It's not about the academia and what drug's the right thing. It's about the interpersonal skills. And I think that was the challenge that gave me the pleasure and the satisfaction in the work I did, was that it required me rather than just a drug or what's the next thing you do on the list of things in the treatment plan. It was about using myself, and that was, I think, where my skill set was.
So you are talking about having a high emotional intelligence more than an intellectual intelligence.
Well, I think probably. And again, I need to be intellectual enough to be doing the job I was in, but it's not where I viewed myself at all. In fact, often have a bit of imposter syndrome when talking about experts, because people say, "Oh, you've been, a senior psychiatrist for 30 plus years. You've done all these exams and training and whatnot," and they use the term expert, and you're giving expert opinions in court, etc. And I've always viewed experts in my head as people who are academic, who can quote you chapter and verse, statistics, the paper by so-and-so or whatever. And I can't do any of that. And I used to think, oh my God, yes, I learned it at one point for an exam, but on a day-to-day basis, it didn't help me do my job. And I just, my head just ditched it. And I went for what was important to me, and that was the people. And so recognizing that, someone being able to say the percentage risk of this person with schizophrenia actually murdering someone is, based on the theory and the science and the risk assessment tools, is 80%. It's not much help when you're in their house and they're psychotic and you're doing a home visit. Whether it's 80 or 20, you need to know if it's right now. You need to be able to read the room in the moment and then take appropriate actions and talk your way out of it. So it's a different skill set and it's a different expertise. And once I kind of had to reframe what I thought an expert was and say there are different types and be okay in my own skin and accept what I brought to the table, I think that was quite important for me. It was a big learning point, because the imposter thing was quite strong. Even now, I mean, I lecture quite a lot, and you always think, I wonder if there's someone in the audience who's going to ask me a question, and I'm going to go, I have no idea. And I'm now comfortable in my own skin, and I know what I know and what I don't know, and that's okay.
Perfect. Pause. So you've talked about, the imposter syndrome of being an expert and having to reframe it to realize, oh, wow, with the experience that I've got, I am an actual expert. Now, in the field that you were for 30 years, I believe it was more than 30 years?
Yeah, more than 30.
More than 30 years, you were dealing with the mentally disordered offenders. As I'm going to use your terminology, because that's a really good terminology. Were you ever? I know you were. So how was it, and how did you get your own stalker? Because we need to talk about that. Rhona from Scotland. I'm not going to say where you're from in case the stalker watches the podcast. How did you get your first stalker?
Well, it came to light in a slightly unusual situation. My children went to a very small private school. And I was asked, when my son left school, he was chair of the Alumni Association, and he asked me to do the Christmas lecture about mental health. And I said, that's fine. So it was advertised on social media so that ex-pupils, alumni could come to the lecture. And so I turned up on the night. It was raining, it was before Christmas, it was dark. As I crossed the playground, I saw someone standing in a hoodie. And I thought, I don't recognise them. The school was so small, I knew all the pupils and all the parents. So I didn't know this person. I thought, oh, that's odd. But the school had said to me in advance, someone from the university has phoned to say they saw it advertised and are interested in possibly changing their career path. Could they come? And of course, it was an evening lecture. That was fine. So I assumed it was the student. I went into a drinks reception first, all very civilised, and then went over to the hall to do the lecture. There was only about 60 people in the audience. I scanned the audience. I saw everyone that I knew, no hoodie man. And I thought, that's odd. I started my lecture. It was an hour-long lecture, and 10 minutes in, I heard a crackling noise. Sounded like tannoy system, and I could hear someone ranting in the background. It was a male voice, but I couldn't make out any words. It was too loud, it was disruptive, and I said, I don't think that's supposed to be happening. And someone went to check. Now, just to say, there was no sound system on. I was standing at a lectern in a small gym hall. And so I thought, where is that coming from? And there was nothing. There was nothing in the room, obvious. The sound stopped, so I continued my lecture. A few minutes later, it started again. Rant, rant, rant. Couldn't make it out. I'm now thinking in my head, as I'm trying to do a lecture, thinking, that feels deliberate. Who did I see today? Is anyone ill? Could someone have followed me? It really felt deliberate. And I had to stop again because of this ranting. And then just before it cut off, I heard, Merry Christmas, Dr. Morrison. And then it shut off.
Holy shit.
I then knew, oh my goodness, that is deliberate. What is it? Who is it? Someone left the hall to investigate. As I say, it stopped. So I had to continue with my lecture, trying to tell witty anecdotes and inform, entertain about mental illness. And then we got towards the end of the lecture. I looked through the glass doors to the side. I could see high visibility jackets. It was the police. They came in and they said, we're really sorry. We don't know what's happening, but we're going to have to escort everybody individually to their cars. Now, half of the audience start clapping. They think I've set it up to make it more interesting. I'm sitting thinking, this is real. This is not funny. Anyway, and then we all get escorted to our car. I was looking under my car, looking at the tyres, all sorts of things, checking in my mirror on the way home. But the police never interviewed me. Then, the next day, the school, my son was there for a meeting. They discovered a walkie-talkie underneath the grand piano, which had been right behind me in the talk, which is where the sound had been coming from. And a teacher said, oh, someone spoke to me in the playground, hoodie man, and had asked, could they film the talk or put leaflets on the seats? And the teacher had refused. And then the hoodie man had never appeared in the room. But we were never any the wiser. And so months went by, I kind of forgot about it, but it was all a bit odd. And then we got a phone call at the team from an ex-patient saying, I think there's something Dr. Morrison should see on YouTube. In fact, there are about 200 videos on YouTube. You don't run off to check because the cybercrime unit have removed them. But there are about 200 videos, all made by this patient's ex-boyfriend, whom I'd met about 10 years before. And I was doing my bit. I'm responsible. If I know that someone is at risk from one of my patients, who might be, become a victim of a crime, I have a duty to report that and to protect them. And so I'd met this person about 10 years before to protect them because someone was threatening to kill them. But they'd obviously blamed me for the failure of their relationship and had been ruminating for 10 years unknown to me that it was all my fault. And here on the videos were lots of individual videos, but quite a lot about me. Dr. Morrison's a liar, written in lipstick on the side of the building. Videos outside my office saying this is the anniversary of the day Morrison ruined my life. Morrison's a black hole. Not nice. But there was also videos about the person talking to the camera saying, I don't know whether I'll use walkie-talkies or a baby monitor to interrupt her lecture. Then there were videos outside the hall where I'd done the lecture. There were also videos inside the hall before I went over to the hall where they'd picked up some shortbread biscuits that were out for a cup of tea later, and they had crumpled them, they sprinkled on the lectern and said, I'll let Morrison know I've been here. It hadn't worked, I hadn't noticed the crumbs, but so there was clear pre-planning to interrupt my lecture so many months before, but it had all been filmed. I knew all of a sudden I had a stalker and this was who it was, so I'd met them. I phoned home and said to my husband, can you sort out the kids? I've got a stalker. I need to go to police right away. This is really worrying. And my husband's response was, why are you so upset? Is that not what you do? I was like, there's a line, you've crossed it. So, this has crossed into my family space. This is not acceptable. And so a whole journey began. And so I had the cybercrime and the stalking lawyers and all sorts involved. But that was the start of it many years ago.
That's such a different way of looking at it. Your husband, especially saying, why this doesn't normally bother you, why would this bother you? But that line had been drawn, and that's, yeah. So when the work comes home, that for Rhona was like, no.
Yeah, it was at my kids' old school. There was lots about it that felt very uncomfortable. And I knew that there was this 10-year build up to it, because it was 10 years since I'd met them. And so all this had been going on in the background unknown to me. And so I think that the fact that it had escalated to offending after 10 years was very concerning. So yeah, I had a right to be concerned about it. Take it seriously. And I mean, I went to court, and he was convicted in the civil court and the criminal court of stalking, and got a non-harassment order. But I think one important point, going back to what we talked about earlier in terms of being non-judgmental, this time I was the victim. And so you might say it's all very good, you academics or you doctors saying you shouldn't judge people and all the rest of it. But the test of, again, is, well, what did I do when I became a victim? So yes, I did charge him, because that's wrong. It's an offence, and it can't. There needs to be a consequence. However, I also went to the police and said, I've met this young man. I think he might be unwell. It's unusual behaviour. I've met him. So I think what you need to do is refer him for a psychiatric assessment as well, because if he's ill, he needs to be treated. It's in my interest too. If there's a mentally ill person who's stalking me, I'd rather they were treated as well. But so I was trying to do the right thing and think of him as well. The ironic thing was, we're the specialists in risk assessment, so the referral came to the forensic team, which I worked at. So obviously I didn't see him. There was a conflict, and my colleague did. But I was really, really pleased at the outcome, because after he'd been seen, we had a weekly meeting where we feedback, any worrying cases or any new assessments. And it got to the feedback about this gentleman. And although I was the boss, my team said, Dr. Morrison, you're the victim. You're not going to hear this. And the patient's got confidentiality, just the same as everyone else, out. And they ceremoniously chucked me out of the meeting. And to this day, I've never had the feedback, and I've never been in the meeting. Every time it was talked about, they asked me to leave. I have every faith that I trained them properly, because they were adhering to correct rules, giving him his confidentiality, but also felt safe that they were well trained, and if there was any issues, they would deal with him and keep me safe. So I think I did live and breathe the message that I give about being non-judgmental. I did do the right thing by my offender.
Wow. And that's, so the offender is no longer, because I think the last time we talked, you said, Cuddy, I can't talk about that because there's ongoing things.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been in the press and it was reported, so it's all finished now. But yeah, there's been no. The update is there's not been any further impact on me personally.
So that's like, I mean, that's baby deer territory. Have you seen baby deer?
No.
Would you not watch baby reindeer for that reason?
No, I don't tend to. Interestingly, people always ask me about, there's things about serial killers and everything, and I tend not. I mean, I don't avoid them, but I tend not to be drawn to them. It just, that was my job. I did it. I really enjoyed it, and my TV is very sad. What I watch on TV.
What is it? Tell us what you watch.
Well, you talk about coping strategies a lot, I'm sure, on your podcast, and I discovered something that works for me if I'm really stressed or I just want to relax. I'm embarrassed to say it, I watch Hallmark movies. Now,
that's nothing. I thought you were going to say Love Island, and I was going to cut the podcast off.
No, I watch them because it's the same actors and actresses, and it's almost the same storyline, so the Christmas ones, it's, they meet, they go to buy a Christmas tree together, they make cookies and ice them, they go to a dance, they kiss at the end, and you don't have to engage your brain at all. They're emotional, and it's all going to end nicely. There's no scary music. You can literally just switch off and relax. And I actively seek them out. I still do it. I just think it's just a way to shut my head off. And so I see TV as a relaxation, shut your head off. I don't do anything intellectual that requires thought. It's just what works for me. And I thought it was very strange until I was on a cruise last year, and I was sitting having dinner with a psychologist, and and I happened to confess the Hallmark thing, and she said, "That's what I do as well." so, so I have a Hallmark buddy. So that's me.
So what? I think I know the answer, but for anyone watching this, what is the difference between a psychologist and a psychotherapist?
Well, I'm a psychiatrist, so that's
Psychiatrist. Sorry,
that's a,
sorry.
no problem.
Psychiatrist.
So a psychologist, I mean, they're best to say what they are, but a psychologist typically has done a degree in psychology, and so often it's quite a niche area. Everyone knows what a psychologist sort of does, I think, but they're usually PhD doctors. So they've often done a lot of research and scientific background to the area of specialism in psychology that they work in, but they're obviously working in mental health, at some area. So there's a crossover because as a psychiatrist, I'm working in mental health too. But I'm a medical doctor, so I've trained the same as a GP, a surgeon, a paediatrician. We all do the same medical training at university, do cardiac arrest, deliver babies, all that, work in A&E. I've done all of that. But then we go on to pick a specialism, and I chose psychiatry and then went on to subspecialise in forensic psychiatry. And so I'm a medical doctor, so as well as diagnosing, I can treat, I can prescribe medication. And because of that, I tend to be dealing with the more extreme end in forensic psychiatry, because the illnesses I deal with, they do need medication as well as all the other stuff.
And
And
that's the difference
also,
between that's mental illness, isn't it?
yeah. And also, as a medical doctor, don't ask me to examine anyone. It's been a very long time. However, I am responsible for making sure I don't miss a brain tumor, or someone comes along to you, Cuddy, with anxiety and racing pulse, really, really anxious. They could, and they've been losing weight, and they think, oh, I'm so nervous. My metabolism's high. Actually, a hyperactive thyroid gland can cause tachycardia, this racing pulse, anxiety symptoms, and weight loss. That's the typical symptoms. So the medical doctor and me will pick out, I need to check their thyroid function. If they're hallucinating, I need to make sure it's not a brain tumor that's causing it. So part of my medical training is excluding stuff before I then treat the mental illness and don't miss something serious. So that's the kind of difference, but there's a huge overlap, and often we work together.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, perfect. Right. Fantastic. So before we move on so we've gone back to your origin story, make it out you're a superhero. We started in the middle. We've gone back in time, and we brought you up to that. Now we're going to start talking about your lecturing, and we're going to start talking about your books, because they are fascinating. They are great. I've got one of the books up there as well, because it does talk about I don't talk to dead people, which is the first book. How quickly did you actually bring it back to the present, to middle? How quickly did you really get over the grief with your husband, your birthday, and the retirement? How quickly did you process that, Rhona?
The processing bit, I genuinely think happened before my husband died.
Yeah.
And the medical bit in my head was saying, this is going to happen. I wasn't holding on to a huge amount of hope that it wasn't going to happen. I realized it was happening. I accepted it and thought, I need to help everyone round about me.
Yeah.
Get their head around this, because it is happening. Support my husband and my family. And I was fortunate in that we'd never said, we'll wait till we retire to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
We had said, let's travel the world. Let's take the kids with us. And so we hadn't put off anything. Obviously, we had plans for the retirement, which involved a lot of travel and things, because that's what we enjoy. But I didn't have any regrets. So that was easier. I didn't think, oh, I'm not going to get to do X and Y. We had actually done a lot. So that made the coming to terms with it a bit easier. I think the fact, I'm a trained coach, business coach, as part of my role in the NHS. I did some training in that, so I have helped people to reframe things, to question assumptions, all that stuff. So again, I kind of do it naturally. I'm fortunate because well, that's part of my training. The other thing, because of the nature and extreme nature of the people, the difficulties that people had that I was seeing, often I had to help them and their families reframe things and I have a glass half full mentality. So I always try and see the positives. Even if something really awful happens, I think, where's the learning in that? Is there any positive that
Yeah.
can come out of it? Oh, my head automatically does it. And I think because I was having to do that, if someone's son's just murdered their father or whatever, and
Yeah.
you're dealing with the family and the son, you're going to have to do quite a lot of work to get them
Yeah.
to come with you on a journey to overcome that. So I guess that reframing and that restructuring was a skill I had. I was going to have to apply it to my own situation, and which is obviously different because your own emotions are involved. But I think I was lucky in that I had a lot of that. And I think resilience as well. You're working in the NHS and there's financial constraints. I was a medical manager, so I had to deal with budgets and staff issues and complaints and suicide reviews and things. So yeah, you had to develop a lot of that in advance. So I was very lucky, in that I was coming into it with a different mindset than most people probably.
So it's funny because you've tagged mindset into it as well, which there's a lot of people say, well, mindset won't get you through a lot of certain things. Things have to be resolved first. But we're like, no, mindset's a really powerful thing for especially going through what you went through, Rhona. So it kind of sounds like you were always asking the right questions to flip yourself back over to the this might be a thing that I might get wrong, but to the right side of the brain, which is the positive side, the left side is the negative side. So the creative openness is the right side of the brain. And if you ask that question, what's the gift? Even if there's something categorically actually gone wrong, but you say, oh, actually, let's have a look, what's the gift? That flicks you back over to the right side of the brain, into the creative side, into the sage mind, which starts creating that resilience part of us.
Yeah, I've just automatically got that
Yeah,
positive thing, and even to the extreme, which this will sound really heartless, but I'm going to be saying it because it's how
yeah,
my head works. That when before my husband had the brain tumor, he had cardiomyopathy, which meant his heart was functioning about 30% of what it should have been. So he was getting really tired latterly and couldn't walk too far. So our retirement reality was going to be probably lots of garden centre visits and lots of Empire biscuits. They're my favourite. And and runs in the car. We weren't going to be climbing mountains.
yeah,
And although we were planning to continue cruising because that's our passion, we've been doing it for nearly 20 years. We were, even before he died, we were starting to have to pick different excursions, or sometimes he'd say, you do that one, we haven't been there, you do the full one, I'll just do the wine tasting or whatever.
yeah,
And so we were starting to change. Suddenly I found myself, I was going to be a solo traveller in life,
yeah,
and that was a different prospect. But it also meant I didn't have the constraints that were going to be in place had we moved
yeah,
forward together. And so in some respects, I was liberated and had an opportunity, a chance to do things that I might never have dreamt of. And just one example, I went on an expedition cruise to Antarctica. Now, that would never had happened had my husband been here. And so, much though I'd much prefer him to be here, I actually was able to reframe it and say, you have an opportunity to do some things that you might never have done. Um, you don't know how long you've got on this planet. That's the one thing I've learned from my experience with my husband passing away. I'd never really planned for him not being there. He'd been there for so long. I thought it was always going to be there. And you suddenly had to go, I've got to reframe this and actually say, I'm now a solo traveller. The future I planned isn't going to happen, but it doesn't need to be a bad one. It's just the next chapter is going to be different and it's not written yet. So I can write a positive one. I've had a ball. I've had an absolute ball because I've given myself permission to be happy. And I think that is a mindset thing. It's not about people judging me. It's actually saying, I'm here, I'm living. What am I going to do with it? And that's the mindset I've had.
yeah. It's extremely powerful. And well, thank you for sharing with people that as well. So let's talk the books. You've got two great books. I've partially read the first one. The second one I have not, but we're going to talk about that because you have talked about your first book is I Can't Talk to Dead
No,
People.
it's I Don't Talk to Dead Bodies.
I Don't Talk to Dead Bodies by Dr. Rhona Morrison. Fantastic book. I remember that. And you're gonna have to. Oh, you're here to talk. Well, touch on that one.
Okay.
So what?
So sorry.
Yeah. What's that book about?
So actually, they're both memoir.
Yeah.
So the first book is my life story. So it covers things like my sister and being
Yeah.
non-judgmental, all the stuff we've mentioned. But it essentially covers my work and it's like a sitting on my shoulder. I take you on a journey as a forensic psychiatrist and all the scrapes I got into. Now, it's not academic. It's lots of short anecdotes, funny stories, bizarre, scary, whatever. However, they're just the hook. There's no names. There's no sensationalism with, this is so-and-so and I saw this scary man. I tell the bit of the story to give you an idea of what my work was actually like.
Yeah.
But, it's the man bringing the machete to the clinic or the man dropping his trousers and masturbating in my office, that kind of thing. However,
just a random, masturbating in my office. That was a Tuesday for me.
But the story behind it is that's someone's son, that's someone's daughter. They didn't ask to get ill. I was privileged to actually work with them, get to know the human being, help them on their journey and see them do really well. And so the story, the message is strong. It's about destigmatization of mental illness, but hopefully it's an amusing, entertaining read. It's quite a light touch on a very dark subject.
Yeah.
But the story ends on the 23rd of March, 2018, because that was my 55th birthday. The day I retired from the NHS, I was fortunate to be able to retire on my 55th birthday on full pension, so it'd always been the plan, but that's the day my husband passed away as well. And so it was the obvious time. It was the end of a chapter. It was the end of my marriage. It was the end of my work as a doctor. It was the end of that big chapter. So that was the end of the book. So the next book is a continuation of the memoir. There are references to my work because it has impacted my life and how I think, etc. But the next book is called From Crime Scenes to Cruise Ships, because it details my journey from then. And the subtitle is Navigating Life's Troubled Waters with Resilience and Hope, because the reason I wrote it is that people kept saying to me, you seem to have done so well managing bereavement and retirement. Your story is quite inspiring. Why don't you share it? And I hope it is. It comes out in August. But the content is the same. It's lots of silly anecdotes about my escapades at sea, etc. When I've been traveling the world. But the message is about things you can think about in terms of being resilient or trying to cope with a change in circumstance. It doesn't need to be bereavement. It could be a relationship failure. It could be divorce. It could be redundancy. It could be significant illness. It could be becoming a carer. It could be all sorts of things. The main thing is it's a crossroads in life where your future plan is not going to be. It's going to change because of this significant thing that's happened. And it's about an encouragement to give yourself permission to take opportunities, to take a leap of faith and to live your best life because you're still here.
You mentioned hope. Hope is such a powerful emotional state for us to get into. Courage and hope are really powerful. Having the courage to do exactly what you've done, Rhona, I often find that courage is the tipping point into those positive emotions such as hope and gratitude and love and resourcefulness, which moves us out of that lower echelon and that lower vibrational emotional states that we can get into, such as depression and guilt and shame. It's a powerful move for you, Rhona, which clearly you've been able to you're a master of your own emotional states, clearly, which is powerful. So which one of the stories can you share? I've got 1,001 stories of cruise ships. So I kind of, because of my experience of working on cruise ships for 13 years, I know many different things that go on cruise ships, but I'd be happy to hear one of your stories of the cruise ships, Rhona.
Well, if I may, there's one I would tell you, which is not a funny story, but I think it's relevant for your audience. And that is, I'm not someone who knows about terms like manifesting and synchronicity and serendipity. I get them all mixed up. However, there is something about saying out loud what your intention is, whatever you call that, because I think it's more likely to happen. If you say it out loud, what actually happens then is you start making decisions based on that, which open up opportunities, or you tell other people and they start supporting you in achieving that goal. So I think I wanted to share that. And how it happened for me was when I was going to publish my book, I was looking for a publisher and I had a Zoom call, much like this, with a publisher. And they were a publisher of business books. And I'm not a business book, clearly. It's a medical memoir. But they had offered to have a chat. and then perhaps direct you, to someone that might help. And during the chat, a lovely lady called Sue said to me, is this a legacy piece or is it a kind of commercial piece? I said, initially it was legacy. I'm just writing all the stories for the kids. And then I thought, I'm 55. I've still got a bit of good to do in the world. Maybe if I tried to sell the book commercially, I could share this message about destigmatization of mental illness. And she said, oh, well, okay. She said, it's still not a business book. Is there anything else? And I'm someone who thinks when I open my mouth. I don't think and then share. It comes out and I surprise myself. It's quite interesting. I don't know what's coming out. So in this interview, and she said, anything else? And I said, do you know what? I love cruising. Imagine if I could be a cruise line speaker, because then I could travel the world and share the message internationally. How good would that be? And her response was, that makes it a business book, because you need the credibility of being a published author to get you the gig on the cruise ship. So she signed me, although it's a business publisher. She signed me, so I'm their only memoir author. Why is that important? So I'd said it out loud, and she had signed me on the basis I wanted to be a cruise line lecturer, which had only just come out of my mouth. And then I thought, well, I better do it then. So I thought, what I'll do is I'll wait. I can sell one to my family, but that's not really, it's published, but I'll wait till I've sold a few and then I'll pursue this. And so I decided I was going off on an expedition cruise to Antarctica, a holiday. I'm on the cruise. Now, I'd been on some solo trips before that since my husband died. I'd been to New Zealand and the Far East, and I'd met lovely people from Texas and Canada that I'd kept in touch with. And when I said I was going to Antarctica, they went, oh, we'll come. So 5 of us went. And on the cruise, one of the Canadian ladies, Nancy, and I both got invitations from crew members to go to dinner. So I got an invitation from a man called Duncan, and she got one from Joshua. And off we went for dinner this evening with another couple as well. And they start saying, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? All this, the usual cruise line chat. And I started introducing myself. And my friend, who had just listened to my audiobook on the aeroplane on the way to Chile, she went, oh my God, she's an author. Her book's called I Don't Talk to Dead Bodies. It's hilarious. I was laughing out loud. I was sobbing at the end. You might have warned me, your husband died at the end. So anyway, and she said, it's called I Don't Talk to Dead Bodies. And they all kind of looked a bit strange at her. And then she said, chapter 9. And I'm thinking, I wrote it. No idea what chapter 9 is. So I'm looking on, what's she going to say next? And she said, it's called Tell Me About Your Genitals. And of course, that started a bit of laughter at the table. And then she said, she's an artist. She's got her own art business now. Show them your art. So I had to pass my phone round to show the art. And tell them that story from the book and tell them that story. So I shared some stories. There was a lot of laughter. We're on a 5-star cruise. Everyone's in the dining room very quietly eating their dinner. We were having a party at our table, having a laugh. And the gentleman that I was sitting with said, I know the person that books for cruise line speakers. I think people would like that. Would you like me to contact him? And that was a pivotal moment for me. Mm-hmm. If we hadn't said out loud what I'd wanted to do, he would have never have made the offer to make the contact. He made the contact. A few weeks later, I was booked to go on a 5-star cruise to Japan for 2 weeks lecturing. And then I had a 3-week one later in the year from Vancouver, Alaska, Japan. And that all started with manifesting, I guess, what I wanted to be, having no actual training in it or anything. And being open to just, when they offered for me to do it, I just went, yes. And I just thought, just go for it. It's a leap of faith. Don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to give it a go. And the rest is history. I'm now lecturing all over the world on cruise ships and having an absolute blast. So that's a long answer to the question you didn't ask me, but I think it's probably helpful for your listeners to kind of think about manifesting or, setting out intentions and being positive. And
intentions are really important. Yeah. And it's funny that you talk about intention. There's a lot of people in the personal development world that say, don't tell people what you're doing. Just do it. But that incantation of saying this is what I am and this is what I do does pique that interest within others. And you're absolutely right. And for a lady that's so positive and so understanding of reframing and all those kind of things, to say I wasn't aware of manifesting is quite refreshing, Rhona. There's so many people that like to say, I manifested all this. I manifested the millions. I manifested this. You've got to do this manifest. And then somebody will say, well, I tried your manifesting. It doesn't work. Because manifesting is one of those terms that people make a lot of money out of. So I think
It
it's
sounds a bit airy fairy. I don't know. I don't know if it's the right term. But stating your positive intentions at very least, I think, is it makes you think. Well, if there's a choice, I'm going to do A or B. If you've already said that your direction is over there and A is more likely to take you or whatever, you're more likely to take that path, which will make you more likely to achieve the goal that you set out. So, one thing I think for retirement and managing your grief, is some people say I didn't have I had no roadmap, no plan, and particularly when it changed when my husband died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think although that's a bit scary, I think it's actually quite helpful, because if you've got a direction of travel and suddenly it changes, you're thrown. If you actually are open to just opportunities that come along, and they come at various times from different areas, from different directions, if you're open to say, do you know what, I'll give it a try, and what's the worst that can happen? I don't like it, or it doesn't work. It's not a disaster. What it is a step closer to what you really want to do, because you've established that's not what you want to do. So it's all learning. It's that positive thing again. You're learning all the time to get closer to what you want to do. And so things that suit you at the time. With bereavement, I'm a multitasker, really busy person. So stopping work and losing my husband at the same time was huge, because I was used to a really busy diary and there was nothing. I had no staff to manage, no budget to manage, no family to look after, all that. It was very different. I needed to fill my diary, and that's not everyone. Everyone's different. I needed to fill my diary with stuff. And then gradually I've dumped the stuff as I've gone along, because the stuff that I really like has filled the diary. And so that's okay. It gave myself permission to just use things and then move on as necessary and try them. I tried being an extra in films and TV. Why not? It was just something else to fill the time. Did it for a while, don't do it anymore, but it was fun.
So what you're suggesting is being like water and going with the flow is very beneficial.
Well, that's what I found, but not everybody's the same. I mean, you'll know introverts, extroverts. I'm more in the extrovert side, I think would be fair to say. And so I get energized by talking and being with people.
Yes, that's how
And for me to cope with bereavement, I needed to be about people, and I needed to chat and whatever. I've got my private time when I'm in my bed at night and there's a pillow that's empty next to me. That's when I would think about my loss. But during the day, I felt energized and positive by people. So I sought out social interaction. If you're an introvert and you get re-energized by quiet time, just having a bit of space to reset and to re-energize, then you're not going to deal with bereavement or retirement the same way as I do. Doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just you have to find your own things that energize you, that fulfill you, that make you passionate about. Even if you're a psychiatrist and you're passionate about mental health, you might be an introvert, so you don't want to lecture on cruise ships like me to several hundred people. That would freak you out. But it might be you decide to volunteer as a fundraiser for a mental health charity, for example. But it might be that you're doing knitting for it because you like being on your own and having the quiet time, because that fulfills you. But you're doing something positive. There's not a right or a wrong. It's just
No,
you having to find your own path.
you're absolutely right. Now, before we go into your artwork, so we're going to talk about your art as well. Now, with all your experience from your life, your work, do you, when you are, I think I know the answer to this already because you're not judgmental, but you must have the skills to be able to spot certain things within people, true or false?
To some degree, but I think people think I have more than I do, because
Right.
it
Do you,
could be
do you
a
find people
conversation.
stop talking to you the second you tell them
A
you're going to
conversation.
talk to her?
Yeah, a conversation stopper at a party might be, oh, I'm a psychiatrist. And people think, oh my God, she's going to analyze me. And in fact, that's not the case at all. As a medical doctor, as I am, we're taught the same as the GP. So if you go to your GP and you say, I smoke 60 a day, I'm coughing up blood, and I've lost 3 stones in weight, they don't say, let me examine your genitals, do they? They recognize the symptom pattern and they go, that's likely to be lung cancer. Let's do all the tests that would prove that. And that would take them off in a direction. I do the same. I take a very detailed history. I recognise patterns of symptoms that I think make a diagnosis, and I go down a particular track. So if I'm talking to you at a party, I'm not doing a very detailed history and taking all the symptoms. My head's not in that gear. I'm not wearing that hat. So I don't do it. So I actively it's switched off. So I do have the skills when I employ them in a specific situation, but on a day-to-day basis, probably not.
Yeah, perfect. So you're never on a cruise ship, and I know on cruise ships you sit on a table with like 7 people at the dinner, the dining room. You got the dining room. You're never. this is adding a little bit of a la Cuddy to the conversation, but you never sat at the dining room listening to people's conversations. And does a thought ever pop up? That's a chronic masturbator. I can tell that's a chronic masturbator person right there. Does that ever pop into your mind?
Funnily enough, no.
Right. Has it ever popped up? That might be someone I'm not going to talk to for the rest of the crew.
No, but I think I mean, joking aside, I think with all people, you're drawn to particular types of people. So
Yeah.
in terms of people that I would automatically be drawn to, they're probably likely to be more extrovert. The thing I've given myself permission again in retirement and being a solo traveler is to not socialize with mood hoovers, who are people who, when you start talking, they're very negative. They take the fun out of, and it's hard work. And I think I'd actually at work, you maybe had to deal with all sorts of people, and some were more difficult than others. But I have a choice now, and so
Hang on, Rhona, we've got. What did you call it? A mood hoover?
Hoover, as in a vacuum.
A mood hoover, so they suck the mood out of the room. Oh, I love it. So that's the negative.
It's not. I didn't patent that term. I don't know where I heard it, but I think it's a really good term in terms of you're aware of it when you're in a situation.
The
Sometimes
drains,
just a real downer, negative.
The drains, not the fountains.
Yeah, more of a fountain girl.
So that's an energy thing, Rhona. That's purely an energy thing. That's your vibrancy and you feel that vibe. So that's kind of touching back into manifestation and understanding the energies in the room. Rhona, that's extremely astute of you, by the way.
I think it's often a mindset thing though as well, isn't it? Because I am a glass half full, so I'll see the positive side of things
and an energy thing.
And reframe it. And if somebody's doing the negative interpretation, the glass half empty, I find it really trying and wearing. And so I had to manage it in my day job if it was there, and try and encourage people to view things in a different way, reframe it. But in my day-to-day life now, I think I have a choice. And I would choose, if I was put at a table with people like that, I would choose not to go back to that table, because you're on holiday, you don't need that. So it doesn't happen very often, but that's again, I think giving yourself permission to try things or to be around people that are positive influences is important. I used to tell my patients all the time. Many of them told me they had friends, but actually the friends were taking their benefit check from them and using it on alcohol, and to fund the drugs and alcohol of people who didn't have a mental health problem, and pretended to be friends to get access to the money, or their friends we just brought you some cannabis and a few cans just to help you out, which was detrimental to the mental health. So we had to have conversations a lot about that sort of thing. So I guess it's in my mindset, my head anyway, because I was doing it at work again, but relevant to everyone, I think.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Mood Hoover's brilliant. I love that. I love that term. So you are actually a fantastic artist. I bought some artwork from you for my wife, and it brought her to tears. It genuinely brought her to tears, and it's one of her. It's the favorite artwork in the entire house, because it's a special dot.
Yeah, well, I call it pointillism. Pictures made of individual. But their proper pointillism, or however you pronounce it with a French accent, is paintings made with dots of coloured paint. But I just do it with dots of black ink, and I just found it was almost like a mindfulness exercise discovered by accident during COVID. I just, in the moment, thousands and thousands of individual dots of ink, and in fact, the covers of both my books, instead of using the graphic artist at the company, I did my own, and they're pointillism pictures, cartoons. But it became a thing, and so when I went back to art again, talking about what you do when you're bereaved. I went back to art, which was a passion from school. I had a 38-year gap, and then went back to the art as something to do. I'd planned to do it in retirement just as a hobby, but I found I was doing quite a lot of it because it filled this gap that I had all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I built a studio in the garden and whatnot. And then I found I was really guilty. I was sitting, painting. At that point, it was just watercolor painting. I was painting a lot. And then I thought, I feel really guilty. I'm able to get up in the morning and do whatever I want for the rest of my life. And financially, I'm secure. And it felt really self-indulgent for someone who'd been a carer, as a doctor. And I just thought, oh my God, that's not right. And I stopped enjoying it. And my friend, who happens to be a psychotherapist, which is very fortunate, she said to me, why don't you think about selling your art? Because that way it legitimizes the activity for you in your head, and then you can get back to enjoying it again. And so and it made sense. So all of a sudden I found myself starting an art business, which I hadn't planned. I was retired. I didn't want a business. And it wasn't about making money. It was actually allowing me to legitimize my hobby, I think. And so that you became the recipient of one of my pieces of art. But the
Lovely.
pointillism was during lockdown. I've discovered that.
Yeah, it was lovely. And I know you teach that on the cruise ships as well, because you do dual. It's not just talking about criminal psychology. It's also about you do art classes on the ships as well.
Yeah, well, when I'm employed, I'm saying employed loosely, but when you're employed on the ships, it's just for the speaking. So I'm just there to lecture about basically the content of my memoir, but it's about mentally disordered offenders and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but when I go on, I offer to do art classes if they want me to do it. So, quite a lot of the ships say, yes, that'd be great. And I do it as well. But the first ship I ever did it on, it was just 400 passengers of a small ship. And I offered to do it. And they said, oh, that'd be great. And I said, how many people would normally come on this size of ship to an art class? 6 to 12 will turn up. I said, oh, that's fine. 46 turned up and they kept coming. so that was really nice. And so when I do it, it's good because you get lovely feedback from people. People get a lot out of it, so it's nice.
We used to when I used to work for Royal Caribbean, I used to do lectures on the cruise ships for the crossings. We used to always upgrade the content for the lectures on the cruise ships. So I started doing meditation. I said, well, I'll do some meditation, and we started in the chapel. Now the chapel, I'd be lucky if there's 20 spaces, 20 seats. I'm like, it's all right, it's meditation. I'm not sure people will be up for it. 20 people, quick lecture, and then we'll do a meditation. By day 4 of the cruise, we'd got over 80 people meditating. I'm like, right, we need a bigger room. We need a bigger room. So we actually moved down to the theatre. The only way we could house it was by moving it down to the theatre. And all of us, myself included, was like, I can't believe this many people want to do meditation. And the feedback we got for meditation, because I did a specific kind of meditation called the monkey mind meditation. And I think that's something we could just briefly touch on before, because I know you're busy today, Ron. I know you've got other things to do. Is because this is something that I'll share. I thought when I was going through my turmoils in life that I thought I was schizophrenic or bipolar because I had these conversations. I didn't realize they were just my conversations. Everybody has them, and it was my monkey mind. It was my emotions talking to me. This loud conversation. How do you, Rhona, how have you in the past helped people understand the difference between having an internal chatter, the monkey mind, the imposter, that conversation, to a conversation with somebody who has got mental illness? What's the differential part for people, Rhona?
Well, there's not one thing. I think typically voices are coming from outside your head. They might be coming from the TV or from the radio or from the tree in the garden or whatever. They're coming from externally. They're talking about you in the third person. That sort of thing. They're often derogatory, odd ideas. They're not just your own head wrestling with a will I, won't I do something, a decision you have to make. I think they're quite easy to differentiate, really. And again, hallucinations, which would be auditory hallucinations, or what I'm dealing with.
Yeah,
they don't occur in isolation. So it might be someone starting to hear voices, but they're also having paranoid delusions, which are part of a delusional system where they believe that the people in the gasworks are melting sugar and they're putting it through the letterbox via pipes that the people put in who are putting the TV line in, and and they've put tinfoil in the windows to blank out the rays from the sun and all. There's usually a whole behavioural thing going on. They've stopped socialising. They're starting to wear sunglasses in the winter. They're not washing. They're not handing in their work for university in time. There'll be a whole range of things. They're not sleeping, and so they're quite different from just an internal dialogue. So
Yeah.
I think they are quite discrete things, which are fairly easy to establish.
Perfect. So to jump on what you've said there is the difference between the people that we all have internal conversations, and that internal conversation is they can't distinguish between if somebody, and I actually did know somebody who was like, my conversations come through the fire alarms and they're telling me that something's happening. That's the difference between an internal conversation, Cuddy, you're an arsehole, what you're doing, that's my own internal conversation, to I'm getting told something through the fire alarms. I constantly hear somebody telling me, do this, do this, do this. There's a differential in those conversations, because that can be quite appeasing for a lot of people that say, oh my God, I have those conversations too. I thought I was, let's go to the word, mentally disordered, possibly an offender. Like, no, the difference between an internal conversation, derogative voice, you're not good enough, to somebody's talking to me through the fire alarm saying you're going to have to go and kill the puppy next door because it's the spawn of Satan, is a different conversation, and that can appease people's minds, Rhona. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that has been a beautiful conversation, Rhona. Thank you so much for sharing your time. Is there anything else you want to share with the world?
I think just give yourself permission to be happy. And I think that's the most important thing. You're still here. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, because you don't know what's around the corner. That's my kind of mantra. So the summary of it is, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Or gin and tonic, because it's either way, it's very nice with the lemon.
I don't drink though.
Are you not a drinker, Rhona? Oh, the cruise ships, I love it when you go. They'll hate it when you go. They're like, no, we don't get any money out of Rhona. Bless. Rhona, it's been an absolute fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on to the Mind Management Mentors podcast. A great story to share. A beautiful. Give me a links for your books as well. Send them and I'll put them onto the description as I can put them out into the world.
Well, I will do. It's easy though. It's the best thing is Amazon. It's ebook, and there's paperback, ebook, and audiobook. So the second one's out in August. But yeah, that's me.
It's been a pleasure having you on. As I often say to a lot of people, if you are enjoying this content, you want to see more, click the link, click the subscribe, because we've got some amazing guests coming onto the Mind Management. If you've not seen any of the other 120 podcasts we've done already, there's some great conversations for people to have and learn from. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on, Rhona. Thank you so much. Great seeing you again, because I know you're super busy. When's your next cruise?
August, off to Iceland to Boston.
Oh, very nice. Who are you allowed to say? Which company?
I don't know.
Tell the world.
I'm going with celebrity.
Very nice.
I'm going to Iceland and Greenland and Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, whatnot, to Boston.
Stunning. It's a lovely run.
And the nice thing is that in Newfoundland, I'm meeting a lady who was on the cruise with me in Antarctica, and she's traveling 6 hours internally within Newfoundland to come and meet me at the port and take me out for the day. So you meet some lovely people, which is really nice. Tomorrow I'm meeting the Texans because they're coming to Edinburgh. So I'm meeting my Texan friends tomorrow.
Well, that coast is generally the coast you're talking about, Boston, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. We did that on Royal Caribbean for about 4 or 5 times, and it is stunning, especially in August, September. Wow, the color change in fall is just absolutely stunning. It's amazing, Rhona. You're gonna love it. You're gonna.
Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Are you gonna Bar Harbor in Maine?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're in Maine.
That's where you get the lobster. Bar Harbor, Maine is where you get the lobster. If it's in the mind, it can be managed. As always, big love from Cuddy, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast. Bye, bye.